in a situation as a leader. Maybe you were having a conversation with a coworker, with a peer. Maybe you are an entrepreneur and you went to an event or you're talking to someone and you had the sense that this person was trying to test your boundaries. Has it happened to you before? If it has, this is a fantastic video for you. In this video, we're going to talk about when someone tests your boundaries, how do you handle it in real time? Now, I want to start off this live specifically by saying that there are several videos on my channel from December of 2025 where literally for the entire month we talked about setting boundaries. And those videos will help you to get a very in-depth dive on how to protect your boundaries. But today I want to talk about when you know your boundaries being tested or you are being tested, how do you respond in real time? I'm going to share with you a couple of overall strategies very quickly before the audience joins, and then we'll dive into each one. The first strategy that I would ask for you to consider as you are navigating this very serious under pressure situation is to know that you have to know your triggers, number one. Number two, you have to be able to read people. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. Number three, you will need to be able to respond in real time. Now, if any of these three aspects sound the least bit interesting to you, you absolutely want to watch this video until the end because I am going to share with you over 20 years of expertise of being in these very friendly and very contentious conversations to help you be able to communicate more confidently and concisely under pressure. This channel, if you're new to me, welcome. And if you're one of my amazing subscribers, welcome back, friend. I'm so glad that you're here today. But this channel heavily focuses in on those advanced communication skills and strategies that will help you to communicate more confidently and concisely under pressure, regardless of what setting you're in. And I do want to let you all know that this is more of an advanced strategy. So if you have been in situations where your boundaries have been tested, or maybe someone you feel like they are trying to test you, then this is a place for you to be at today. Now, earlier this morning, we talked specifically about when someone tests your boundaries, when someone crosses your boundaries, why do they do it? And I will not go into a ton of detail on that right now. We talked a bit about it this morning, but I do want to highlight that typically when your boundaries are being crossed and people are trying to test your boundaries, it is a level of positioning that they are trying to do with you. What do I mean by that? When someone's trying to cross your boundaries, or maybe they're trying to test your information, they are trying to determine specifically if you are at the level that they are at. Now, many people will say maybe that's not the case, maybe they don't mean it that way. Well, when it comes to high stakes communication, in terms of what I specialize here on this channel to help you be successful, you have to know that this very well could be happening to you. Someone may be trying to determine, am I better than this person, or are they better than me, and etc. Now, I'm going to share with you a real live example that happened to me just recently at an event as it relates to where I felt as if someone may have been trying to test or try to determine if they're better than me than not. I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened, and I'm going to walk you through exactly how I handled it in real time in hopes that it will help you be able to do the same. Now, I want to say hello and welcome to those of you watching the live today. Let me know what part of the big, beautiful world you are joining from today. And have you ever felt like someone was testing your boundaries? If you have, put it in the comments below and let's talk about it. This is a great opportunity for you to ask me questions about this scenario, or if this has happened to you, what happened? Were you able to navigate this situation? Did you struggle with it? Let's talk about it. I will help you today to be able to have a different perspective so the next time this situation happens and you feel like you are in a challenging conversation, you will know what to do. Now, let me give you a scenario in terms of what happened to me. But before I go into that, I did give you three aspects of, or rather, three strategies I want you to start implementing today when you find yourself in a situation where someone's testing your boundaries or someone's trying to test you. These three strategies will change your life. They will completely change your life. Now, I know a lot of times when people look at my channel, they feel like I talk a bit more about more of the corporate language and corporate world and corporate America and etc. But I'm sharing with you real life scenarios that happen in regardless of what situation you're in. You want to be able to communicate more confidently and concisely under pressure. Now, the first strategy I mentioned to you, and I've talked about this at length here on my channel, and I know it may sound like I talk about this all the time, but I want you to understand how incredibly important it is for you to know your triggers. You have to know the things that will make you upset. If you do not know those things that make you upset, feel free to contact me at exciteexcellence.org. I will help you to find those things that make you upset. Because oftentimes, when we do not know ourselves, which is why as executive coaches, we help you to understand that. Then, when those situations come up and someone says something that causes you to be upset, you are literally caught off guard and you respond immediately out of emotion. And I don't want you all to do that. So, thank you for the heart emojis, friends, knowing your triggers is critically important. Now, the scenario I'm going to share with you in just a moment in terms of what happened to me, specifically here recently, I'm going to walk you through exactly what I did so that you can be empowered to handle these situations when the pressure is on and someone's trying to test your boundaries. I want to say hello to Kathleen Toll. I hope I'm saying it correctly. 81. Hello, Kathleen. How are you doing today? Welcome, welcome. Now, I mentioned to you, you have to know your triggers. You have to know what things are going to make you upset. If you do not know those, then contact me at exciteexcellence.org. There's multiple ways I will help you to find this out. Okay, Kathleen says good. Well, welcome, Kathleen. Now, the second scenario I want to tell you, or strategy rather, is you have to read people. Now, before I go into reading people, I do want to let you know that if you do not learn anything from over a thousand videos I have on my YouTube channel, I need you to learn that reading people is one of the most important communication techniques, strategies that you need to incorporate into your life now, immediately today. Because, why do I say this? Most people are not trained to communicate at a higher level than their peers. I have been in those situations, which is why I'm sharing everything that I know to you in my audience as much as I can in a group setting. Of course, there's always a time where you need some real customized support, and that's why you work with me directly to do that. But most people are not trained to really pay attention and learn how to read people. There is a difference between looking at someone and observing someone. And what happens most of the time is that individuals, whether you're in a leadership role or not, but I focus on leaders, is that we are trained to just simply look, but we're not trained to observe. So if you subscribe to my channel or you follow my content or follow me on social media on any of the platforms that I have account that any of the accounts I have that any of the platforms I have accounts on, then you will start learning how to be able to read people better. This is a skill you have to learn. If you want to elevate and you want to be able to be that person that does not freeze when you speak in front of a group of people, the person who can negotiate their salary or negotiate large multi-million dollar, billion dollar contracts, you have to learn how to read people and get a sense of how do I manage myself in these very high stakes, high pressure situations. Now, let's talk about the scenario that happened to me specifically. I'm going to walk you through the steps that happened to me in real time as if you were there in hopes that it gives you some insight in terms of why reading people is one of the most fundamental skills that you need to have if you want to be someone that can communicate in those very high stakes, high pressure situations. Let me give you a backstory. I was at an event that was hosted here at the convention center here in Broward County in Florida. And the event itself was a huge business event. A lot of entrepreneurs were there. Obviously, many people are very excited to be there and they're looking forward to interacting with other entrepreneurs, promoting their businesses, gaining different additional revenue and clients, and building relationships and etc. Now, what happened in the case of the story I'm sharing with you today is that I went as an attendee. I was not a vendor at this specific event. I went as an attendee, and there was one table that I walked to, and I wanted to learn more about their services. They were offering services specifically as it relates to life insurance. So they had a banner there that said their services. I happened to be right behind someone else that was very tall. And therefore, when that person moved out the way and I waited to my turn to go to the table, they thought that I was with that person. And I said, no, I was not. Okay, now this is where reading people is a skill you want to master. Okay, get a pen, get a paper, take some notes on this one. Now, this situation was very, very interesting because when I walked to the table, I said hello, and they thought I was with this person, and they asked, "Are you with this person?" I said, "No, I'm not." Okay. Number one thing, if I'm going to someone's table and we have established that I'm not with this person that they were communicating with, then you would expect that there would be some type of warm greeting. Hello, how are you? Nice to meet you, etc. That didn't happen initially. That was number one. That was the first thing that I observed, was that there wasn't that warm interaction. So when you are in situations like that, where you're meeting someone for the first time and you feel like it's not a warm interaction, you have to pick up on that and say, okay, this may not be the right setting for me. So I had that in the back of my mind. Now I was already there. And I generally was interested in what they were offering. So they had a banner, and I asked specifically, I said, okay, I see that you are offering services in life insurance. Can you tell me a little bit more about your products? Okay. I asked a question, just wanted to get some information. Let me tell you the response that I received. My response was, what information do you want to know? There wasn't a smile. There wasn't any type of warmth. And I said, interesting. Okay. I'm asking you a question about your business and you're asking me, what do I want to know? It typically doesn't work like that as an entrepreneur. We are always willing and ready to talk about our services for people that may not know anything about our services. We usually are able to do that. So that was my second cue, where the response was very cold. What do you want to know? I said, okay, I'm about to just walk away from this table right now because the interaction did not seem very welcoming, I would say. This is why reading people is important, because I was able to determine from this individual that, number one, that warmth was not there. I'm not sure why. I'd never met this person before, but it just simply wasn't there. And then number two, I observed their facial expressions. This is how you read people, everyone. I observed their facial expressions, and I noticed that there was no smile. As I talk about here on this channel, you want to take a look at someone's smile, their mouth, and their eyebrows, because that will automatically show you some level of excitement that they have. If you really want to narrow it down, I would say your eyebrows are probably going to tell you a lot more if someone's really excited to speak with you or not, because they naturally will go up because they're excited. But the mouth, sometimes people will try to do a fake smile. So I would pay a little bit closer attention to someone's eyebrows if you're trying to read somebody in terms of how they communicate. Now, where did the conversation go from there? And when that person said, what do you want to know? I said, well, I see you offer life insurance. So can you tell me about that? Already as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, I just was like in my mind thinking, this is probably not right. I probably need to leave. But the person started talking. And so they talked a bit, not so much about their services, but just highlighting some successes they accomplished in their business. And I said, oh, that's fantastic. I'm glad you had good successes. Now, keep in mind, I'm reading this person. I'm reading this person. And even though I felt like the conversation was not as warm as it needed to be, I was interacting because I'm there as an entrepreneur, and this person already started speaking to me, and I said, let me be polite, but let me be on a little bit on guard, not too much, because sometimes people just don't know how to communicate, which is why you subscribe to the channel, friend. But some people do not know how to communicate, and I said, well, let me just listen. So the person talked about the successes they've had in their business, and they were doing this and doing a lot of wonderful things, which was great. And I said, that's fantastic. Well, congratulations on the growth you've had in your business. That's wonderful. Now, what happened next? This is where I want you all to take some notes. The person ask me a question. Now, this dialogue I'm sharing with you is exactly how this conversation went. Now, I want you all to let me know in the comments below if the conversation you had was like the conversation that I had. How would you feel about this next question? You have to put it in the comments below. Let me know. Let me know. I'm going to tell you what I thought, but I want to know what you think. Talk about successes. I said, that's great. Congratulations on the successes in your business. That's amazing. The next question I was asked was, how old are you? Now, I want to know from you, if someone asked you that question in the middle of you saying congratulations on your successes, what would your thoughts be? Would you think that was a friendly question? Or would you pause for a second and say, this conversation may go under pressure? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll share with you what I did. Now, for me, as an individual, as someone that has been in those very high stakes, high pressure situations, when someone asks you a question that is completely off topic for a person you've never met before in your life, and they ask you a question about your age, they are typically asking a question about your age because they are wanting to establish the playing field. They want to establish that I'm at a higher level than you are because of my age. And I will share with you now, and thank you for the heart emojis. We talked about this with Fetchy earlier this week. Just because you may be younger in age does not mean you do not have experiences of some other people. You have no idea what people go through in their lives. And that scenario, when this person asked me about my age, in my mind, had nothing to do with their business successes, had nothing to do with being an entrepreneur, had nothing to do with nothing. I mean, it had nothing to do with nothing to ask me my age. So what did I do? Now, I could have been the person and been just this very novice entrepreneur or novice communicator and say, oh, I'm XYZ. But I decided to say, you know what? As soon as that came up, I said, hold on just a second, just a second. This conversation may go under pressure. Now, if you're new to my content, let me show you my decision making algorithm or tree that I use in these scenarios. When someone makes a comment to me, you have to always be on guard. I don't care how friendly they are or how nice they are or how wonderful the conversation is going. You need to always be there observing and listening. Now, when someone makes a comment, I have to determine three things very fast, instantly. Is this a friendly comment? Is this a not friendly comment? Or is it in between and I'm not sure? I have to determine that. Now, if someone asks you, how old are you? In the situation that happened to me, what would you think? Would you think that's a friendly comment, an unfriendly comment, or would you be in between? What are your thoughts? I'll tell you what I did. In my mind, I said, I don't like that, but I'm going to put that as in between. Because this person, I, in my mind, felt like was trying to determine a level playing field or that they were at a higher level than I was. Now, were they being malicious in that question? Maybe not, but that doesn't mean I need to respond in a polite and very cordial way. So anytime you find yourself in a situation where you're in between and you don't know if it's friendly, you don't know if it's unfriendly, and you're just like, I'm not sure if I want to go continue this or go in that direction, I always encourage my audience and my clients I work with, you always have to go in the direct way. It doesn't matter if you're not quite sure and you're in between. I would much rather prefer for you to respond in a very direct, very assertive, affirmative way than to respond in a very overly polite, overly cordial way. Why? Because when you're in between, you are basically saying, I don't know where this is going. I don't know where this is going, and I don't want this person to think that the direction this is going is okay. You have to be able to set that boundary because someone's trying to test your boundary. There may be aspects of yourself that you don't want to share. So what did I do? Olivia Mead. Hello, Olivia. Hope you're doing well today. What did I do? I told this person, I said, okay, I thought to myself, I don't like it. This is in the middle. I'm going to be very direct. So I answered the question because I'm here as an entrepreneur. I don't want to completely burn the bridge just yet unless they say something else that's ridiculous. Because it's in between, I'm going to go very affirmative in terms of my response, but be very vague. So I said, I'm in my 40s. And they said, "Oh, you, oh, okay." And so from that moment, friends, the conversation changed. Let me explain to you why. I answered a question but did not give a direct answer. And when someone asks you a question and they're testing your boundaries and you do not give them the direct answer that they are looking for, that makes them think, oh, wait a second, I need to change how I'm communicating because they're not getting what they thought they were going to get out of the conversation. This is how you handle it in real time. The conversation changed from there. The person said, "Oh, I am X years old," and this person was older than I was. They were at least 30 years older than I am, 30 or 40 years older than I am. And that's fine and that's great. But the person was like, "Oh, you should never be ashamed to say your age," and all this stuff. But in actuality, friends, that comment or that question was really not warranted at all. I'm not at a doctor's office. I'm not giving my age. I'm talking to someone that has a business. And so you have to determine really quickly, as I said, if this conversation or this statement is friendly or unfriendly. Now, I know this may sound like a lot, and you're probably thinking, how in the world do you manage all this in real time? That is why you work with me directly, because I will help you to do that. But the conversation went in a different direction. So the person said, "Oh, you don't have to necessarily feel bad about saying your age and etc." And I don't feel bad about saying my age by any means, but I'm not going to give you the answer you're looking for because I don't like the question that you asked. That was a line in the sand for me, and the conversation shifted. Then the person said, "Well, what do you do?" So see how the conversation transcended. It went from very cold, very, very cold, to I'm going to ask you a question to try to develop my seniority here and let you know, oh, I'm this old and I have all this experience. You're nobody. Then it went to, oh, well, what do you do? And so when someone asks you a question about, oh, well, what do you do? Then that means they are trying to get some interest in terms of what do you do? The conversation has shifted. It is not staying in the path where this person thinks that they perhaps may have more experience than you or may have more knowledge than you. Then they're wanting to know a little bit about you because you have basically redirected and changed the direction of the conversation. Now, that is how I handled it in real time. The conversation ended politely, but I'm sharing this with you because anytime you are in a situation where you feel like someone is testing your boundaries, you have to be able to respond in real time. Now, a lot of times people struggle with thinking on their feet. They don't know how to think on their feet. They're not sure how to do it. I'm giving you everything I can to help you be able to do this because I know thinking on your feet is hard. I know it's very challenging to do. But when you're in those very under pressure type of situations, this is how you navigate them. This just happened to me last week when I was at an event. I haven't posted about the event just yet because I've been just very busy with clients. But this happens regardless of what setting you're in. You can be in a leadership setting, you can be in a corporate setting, you can be an entrepreneur. You have to be able to pick up extremely fast when you feel like a conversation is going in the wrong direction, or if someone's asking you a question that's crossing a boundary. Now, for me specifically, the question of age, that's not a trigger for me. By any means, it's not a trigger for me at all. However, I did not see any relevance to that conversation to someone I did not know, that I was simply having a conversation about their services as an entrepreneur. And so you have to be able to determine, is this person trying to engage with me and have a good conversation, or are they trying to size me up, basically? And in this particular situation, they were trying to size me up. Let me tell you one other thing that happened in this situation to give you some perspective. I met a really nice husband and wife that have a social media company that I'm probably going to end up working with them, that are based here in Miami. And I literally had a conversation with them for at least 20 minutes. They encouraged me to go to lunch with them because we all had there was a big lunch they had because they had speakers. I talked to the wife for at least over an hour. Do you know age did not come up at all? Why would it? We're talking about businesses, we're talking about life, and that's the difference that I want to share with you, is that sometimes your conversations, you may think that, oh, they're very friendly and etc., but you have to be mindful there's some questions that someone's trying to test your boundaries on. Let me go to the chat really quickly. God's Messenger Michael, hello, welcome, welcome. Hope you're doing well today. Ches, man of culture, hello, Ches. High five, friend. Good to see you, Ches. Ches says, hello, friend. I late? Of course not. Ches, you're never late, friend. I'm glad that you're here today. So we talked about a couple scenarios. I will say, Ches, that we just went over a scenario that happened to me. This might be one of those lives that you want to watch back the replay of it, because I talked about how do you handle someone testing your boundaries or trying to test you in real time. And I just gave a scenario that happened to me last week when I attended a entrepreneur event here in Broward County at the convention center. And I had an interaction with someone where they were trying to basically determine if they were better than I was, and this was just a conversation. I walked through exactly how I handled that in real time and how I was able to shift the dynamics of the conversation. So it's a lot that we uncovered, but I'll give you the three insights that I want to share with you, and I'll recap them for the audience as well. Remember, you have to know your triggers. I talk about this a lot. I know you're like, oh my gosh, I'm tired of hearing it, but I want to tell you that it's fundamental for you to know these things. You have to know your triggers. So knowing your triggers is number one. Number two, you have to read people. As I mentioned at the very beginning of the live, if you watch my content, and I know we have over 1,000 videos here, and I appreciate you all being here and watching the content. I know it's a lot. Okay. I know communicating at that higher level and being on all the time is sometimes a very different mindset shift that you have to get used to thinking in that way. This is why I'm helping you. But learning how to read people is one of the most fundamental strategies that you have to learn and you have to master. If there's nothing else you learn from this channel, okay, I know there's a lot, and I say this in all sincerity, reading people is one of the most important things that you will need to learn how to do. Even if you're struggling with speaking and you're not sure what to say, the sheer fact that you can actually read someone and pick up on their facial expressions, pick up on their body language, pick up on what they're saying and what they're not saying will automatically set you apart from everybody else. So reading people was my second strategy. I talked at length in terms of the scenario that happened to me specifically, in terms of how I read this person and how I was able to change. And then third and finally, being able to respond in real time. And so I shared with you what I said specifically when I was asked the age question, how I answered the question, but I answered it in such a vague way that the person probably felt a little uncomfortable for asking me that and probably took a step back and said, oh, I probably shouldn't ask that because she didn't answer it the way I wanted to. Most of the time, when someone's trying to test your boundaries, they are trying to get an answer to their question. And it, as inappropriate as the question may be, or as intrusive as the question may be, they want an answer. But if you can not respond or respond in a way to where you answer it, but you don't give them what they're looking for, they automatically think to themselves, whoa, who am I speaking with? Any other normal person that's not subscribed to my channel would probably say, oh, I'm this age and yeah, this is how I am. Not here. That's not how I'm training my audience. I'm training you all to be those individuals we need that can pick up quickly and respond really fast. Okay, Chad's Man of Culture says, do you have a video about setting boundaries in a workspace without coming off rude? So, Chaz, I have a lot of videos about that. This is probably a good example what I shared in terms of how I responded to this person that was crossing boundaries. But let me give you a couple insights just to keep in mind. I would say first, for the month of December of 2025, we talked about nothing but boundaries, literally for the entire month. So that may be a good insight. There's a couple videos we've had on the live tab about boundaries. I believe some of them I put them on the playlist. I have to check and see. It might be Executive President's Mastery. I have to check and see. But to answer your question, the best ways, Chess, to set boundaries in a workspace setting without sounding rude, knowing that you already know your triggers. So you already know, Chess, that triggers are important. You have to know not only your triggers, but what are your boundaries? What are they? Do you have this is my boundaries I said for in December. There's 5 boundaries. There's a lot of boundaries, but I just brought it down to 5 for the sake of having a conversation. You have the time boundary, the money boundary, the energy boundary, your personal boundary, and your professional boundary. There's 5 boundaries that you have to think about when you're in a workspace setting. Well, what do I want these boundaries to be? One of the things you want to think about, Ches, and I talked about this, it's one of my older videos on my channel about setting boundaries. But one of the things I want you to consider is, what boundaries do you need? So if you're in a workspace setting, if you can give me some insight in terms of maybe what you want to set, I'll give you more detail or more context. But what type of boundaries does Ches need? Do you need someone to not give you a project at this particular time when it's due tomorrow? Do you need someone to not talk to you about a specific topic because it's inappropriate? Do you need someone to not bother you when you are in the middle of a project because you're trying to finish what you're doing? You have to determine, what type of boundary do you need? What boundary do you need first? So that's the first thing we have to do. What boundary do you need specifically? The next thing you want to do is, how do you communicate that boundary? And so a lot of times it comes down to your delivery of the boundary. So for instance, and I'm just throwing something out there, Chaz, because I know you work on a lot of projects, but if you have something specific, friend, I will give you any insight that I can. So let's say, for instance, you have a boundary. You have a project you're working on, and you need to set a boundary that people do not come and interrupt you during this particular time period because you're trying to work on this boundary. How do you say that without coming across as the rude person? One of the things you can do is, once you've identified your boundary, determine who is it specifically that is the most likely person to cross that boundary. Everybody has somebody. Everybody has somebody in the workspace that they're just gonna come. They're gonna come and doop doop doop, knock on your door, or come into your cubicle, or whatever your workspace setting may be. Yeah, everybody has that one person that just keeps doing it. Now, when you have that person, you want to make sure that you're communicating this boundary to your team. So you don't want to isolate this person out necessarily, but you have one person that just keeps bothering you. Most of the time, we all know there's somebody. So having a conversation with your team and say, there's this huge project that I'm working on. I'm at the point where I'm at A, B, and C. I really want to be able to accomplish E, F, and G by tomorrow. I'm going to need to have time from 2 to 4 or 5 o'clock to solely focus on this. So if you see that I'm busy or I'm not responding to messages, please don't take offense to it. I'm just in the middle of trying to finish this project. That's one way you can say it. The key is, when you are trying to set those boundaries at work, it's the way you say it and who you say it to and how you say it. If you if you explain it in such a way that where you're trying to set those boundaries in a way that where you are trying to improve or enhance your role or enhance the organization, if you say it in that way, most of the time people will usually back off on you. They'll usually say, oh, okay, Ches is working on this. There's a couple things Ches working on. Let me leave Ches alone. Ches already made it clear that Ches is working on this. So you have to communicate and let people know what it is that you need as your boundary. So if you have anything specific, let me know. But that's just an example that I would give. If you're working on a project and you know that people keep bothering you, you're trying to finish your project, but people keep interrupting you, letting them know, I'm at this point. I'm almost done. I need some quiet time to work on this project. I'm going to be devoting my time to it between this time and this time, or the entire day I'm working on this project. If I'm not able to answer your messages, do not be offended. I'm in the middle of working on a project. Now, if it's something where it comes to time, let's say you have to leave at a certain time, then your boundary has to be a little bit different. So let me give you an example. When I was working as a C-suite executive, I was at the point where I was trying to start my business. And I had to spend time and had to pick up my kids at a certain time and all that. Now, I will tell you this, when you're working in those senior executive roles, it is almost required for you to work way over hours, regardless of what you're doing. Well, I had to stop that. I could not keep doing that. I could not. And what I would do is I would communicate and say, whenever we had meetings, and they'll say the meeting was at 4 o'clock and I need to leave at 5 o'clock, I would make it known before I even stepped into the meeting to say, I have a hard stop at 4:50, or I have a hard stop at 5 o'clock. If there's anything else that you all need from me, let me know and I'll get back with you. You have to just communicate and let people know, but let them know in a way to where it doesn't come across as rude. And a lot of times it's just the way you say it, Chiz. It's the way you say it and how you say it, and thinking of the most positive way to present it. So for instance, when there were events that were going on after hours and I couldn't attend because I was with my kids, I would say, my kids have got an event going on, I'm unable to attend. That's how I set my boundaries. That's what I had to do. And so a lot of times it just depends on what you're trying to say. Okay, Jeremy Bullwinkle 3972. High five, Jeremy. Good to see you, friend. How you doing today? Jeremy says, hello, Dr. Jacinta. Sorry I'm late, but I'm all ears. No problem, Jeremy. I'm glad that you are here today and welcome, welcome. We have been talking about setting boundaries and how to navigate these boundaries in real time. I provided a insight in terms of specifically a situation that actually happened to me last week as an entrepreneur in terms of how to manage those very challenging situations in real time so you know how to respond specifically when they come up. Anything else I'm thinking about that I want to share with you as it relates to that, Chiz? Knowing your boundaries and knowing how to communicate them is key. As long as you say it in a very polite tone, a very upbeat tone, most of the time it will not come across as rude. The key, Chance, is you just have to communicate. You have to be able to speak it to them. If you have something specific, you just let me know in any video and I'll give you some insights in terms of, what are some things you might want to say to not sound rude when you're trying to set that boundary. Okay, Jeremy Bullwinkle says, great topic. Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate that. Now, let me know, for those of you watching, have you ever been in a situation where you felt like someone was testing your boundaries? I want to know, how did you handle it? Did you handle it in the way you wanted to handle it, or did you struggle with it a little bit? Because a lot of times we do struggle with setting boundaries. This is one of the most difficult things a woman in leadership can struggle with, and a man in leadership can struggle with. We all struggle with boundaries. This is very, very hard. And I've talked about this a lot on my channel while I'm waiting for responses to come in. Most of the time, as individuals, when we hear the word boundaries, there is something inherently within us that says this is going to be a conflict when we have that discussion with someone. And most of the time, when that happens, people tend to not want to interact or not want to set boundaries because they are afraid of whatever conflict that will happen. Now, if you go back and watch this live, for those of you that joined a little bit later, you'll see how my decision process is to handle those situations when I get the sense that there's someone that's trying to test something on me or test a boundary or test my knowledge or etc. But most of the time, people don't want to set boundaries because they're simply afraid. They're afraid because they don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to say it. They don't want to come across as rude, right, Chaz? They don't want to be rude. They don't want to be aggressive. They don't want to be mean. They don't want people to hate them. They don't want them people to not like them or talk bad about them. And so there's a fear that we have internally as to why we don't want to try to set boundaries. But I will tell you that setting boundaries is one of the most important things that you'll need to learn how to do as a leader. It not only helps you to build yourself as a leader, it helps you to take care of yourself. And then it also helps you to develop an executive presence as well. Boundaries is a requirement that you have to set. And being able to communicate under pressure is one of the ways you can set those boundaries really quickly. Boundaries are set in so many ways. Sometimes it's just the fact of someone saying something to you. As I mentioned when the person was asking me earlier in last week about my age and etc., how I diverted that. But sometimes when you correct someone or do not give them what they're looking for in terms of the answer to your question, you are setting that invisible boundary that I like to set to say, wait a second, hold on. You don't need to communicate with me that way, or you don't need to ask me that type of question because you will not get the answer that you're looking for. So, setting those invisible boundaries is critically important. This is how you develop an executive presence, friend. When people have an executive presence, they feel that person in the room. They know that person is there. Why? Because that person has set some invisible boundaries around themselves that everybody, they can't see it. They can't see it, but they know that it's there. And they know there's a certain way they have to communicate with them. And this is why I'm so incredibly passionate about helping you all communicate in those very high stakes, high pressure situations, because I want you all to be that exceptional group of leaders that can communicate at a higher level than everybody else on the planet. Okay, Chaz Man of Culture says, Okay, because let's say my supervisor doesn't like something about the project. So rather than approaching me as the project manager, they confront my team instead, which I find disrespectful. I would agree with that, Ches. Ches also says, but it's difficult to confront your supervisor without creating tension. That's a really great scenario. So let's unpack that, Ches. And I appreciate you, one friend, for mentioning that and sharing that here. So if you have a situation like that, a lot of times supervisors will do this, as you mentioned, when there's one person, but they're not trying to isolate that one person. They're just trying to tell everybody as a whole. Now, sometimes the reasons why supervisors do that is for a couple of reasons. And I'll tell you this from my perspective as being in that type of role before. Sometimes it's a legitimate issue. So sometimes it's a legitimate issue for the group as a collective. So it may not be just Chaz, it could be other people having this issue or challenge with this particular part of the project. But then sometimes the supervisor just may be taking the more cowardly approach to being able to talk to somebody, and they're probably afraid to talk to you directly. Now, I'm just saying that in my very humble opinion. I don't know if that's the case, but that's what I've seen in terms of when supervisors tend to talk about things to a group as a whole. Either it's genuinely an issue that everybody needs to work on, or they are just a little bit afraid to have a difficult conversation with you, which is the reason why we're going to prepare you for whenever you have that conversation. So, kids, what I would do in this case, in your situation specifically, because you're managing, you're a project manager, you're managing a project, your supervisor is saying or making statements that's kind of including the whole team instead of talking to you directly. I would have a conversation with them. And the way I would do it is the way I share with you all here on the channel. We have to try to gain information because more than likely your supervisor probably does not communicate at the level as we do here on the channel. So I'm betting on that. I'm betting that they probably don't. What I would do is I would have a conversation with the supervisor and I would say the following. I would try to see if you can gather some information or see what they're willing to share. I would have a conversation and say, supervisor, I know we talked about this issue, okay, whatever this issue is, as it relates to the project. As the project manager, can you share with me a bit more about what your concerns are and what do you feel as if we need to improve to reach whatever project management goal we're trying to do? And I wouldn't say anything else. I would just let your supervisor just talk because most of the time people they may not be trained to just be as strategic in terms of how they communicate than other people. Why do I say this? Because if your supervisor is saying something collectively to a group, and I'm just this is Chaz, I don't know specifically if this is right. You tell me if it's right whenever you have this conversation. I'm just putting a speculation there. So I could be completely 100% wrong. But if their supervisor is talking about a situation and it's in front of a group of people, but you have direct involvement in it and they're not talking to you directly, then more than likely it's probably an emotional topic for them. It may be something that brings emotions to them. So if you catch them off guard and you just ask a simple question in terms of, I know we talked about this in our team meeting as it relates to this project. Since I'm the project manager, I want to check to see what other areas you feel like we might want to perhaps work on, or what else do you feel like we need to, what are the metrics you feel like we need to meet to accomplish this goal? It will be, you will probably get the knee jerk response from this person that will actually be what they really want to say. Now I know I'm sharing with you something that may be just a bit more advanced than what people think, but this is how I strategically find out information. Because it probably will be that knee-jerk response and you really need that. You need that knee-jerk response. And what I mean specifically is that somebody when you go to the doctor's office and they're checking your reflexes, they're going to tap your knee and see if your leg comes out. You need that kind of response if you feel the least little bit that your manager is having a problem with something, but they're not talking to you about it. Because more than likely, they will divulge what the issue is. They may say, Chaz, we're struggling with this, or Chaz, this is an issue. I really need to work on this, and etc. And they may tell you exactly what the problem is. Then when they share that with you, you could always say, if that's it, first appreciate you mentioning that concern. So you're disarming them because they're going to share with you something that most likely will be coming from an emotional state. Remember, you got to prepare for the knee jerk. Sometimes the knee jerk may not, the actual kick out may not be that much, and sometimes it may be a lot, but you have to prepare for that. So you want to disarm them. If they tell you what it is they want to say, then you may say, I appreciate you sharing that, meaning I appreciate what you said. You're lowering the tension of the conversation, okay? Because they're already going to be maybe frustrated with something. So you're lowering the tension, and then you can say, is there something else that you need to share, or is there any reason why that wasn't shared with me, or is there something else that we need to talk about, just to try to build that relationship back, whatever it is that's going on. You have to find out what they're talking, what is in their mind, and I'm sharing with you the exact strategy that I would do if I was in that situation. Now, you want to obviously be mindful, but I genuinely believe that if you set some time to talk to your supervisor and just reference the meeting, because this is something that actually happened, this is relevant, and you can say, I was reflecting on the meeting that we had, and I know you mentioned the issues were A, B, and C. I wanted to talk to you just a bit more about A, B, and C to see what are some things we can do to improve A, B, and C, or if there's something else that you may know about so that I can better be able to manage this project. Let them talk, but the way you're asking it is not in a confrontational way. I'm asking a question in a very polite way. And as long as your tone of voice, we talk about that, is the same, your same baseline in terms of how does Chaz normally talk to your supervisor, that's the same voice you want to have. If you come in and say, I don't understand why we had this conversation. Why didn't you talk to me? Then the tone of voice is going to be different, and the supervisor is going to automatically be on guard and say, "Whoa, what's going on with Chess?" So as long as you are keeping that same tone of voice that you normally have when you're speaking to your supervisor, they will not be alerted to say, "I'm about to have a tense conversation with Chess." You want to make it like a conversation, like genuinely, you're trying to figure out exactly what's going on, what are the issues, and what is it about this that they didn't feel like they could talk to you about. But you don't want to say that directly. You want to try to gain information, and based on what you hear, Chiz, and based on how you observe them, reading them, that will pick up on things. Now, let's say we have a another scenario that happens. You go in there, Chaz, and you ask that question, and the supervisor says, "Oh, everything's fine." Okay, that would probably be a problem. And the way you can tell that is by looking at their face. This is so incredibly important, Chiz. You have to look at their face. See exactly what they want to say, but they're not willing to say. And if you observe their facial expressions and they answer you in a very quick way, and you just see that there's no emotion that comes with this topic, then they are hiding something from you. There's something that they're hiding, they're not wanting to share with you. Because if they had the time to bring everybody together and talk about this as an issue and it's directly related to Chaz, then why would this topic have no emotion to it when I ask you about it? That means something else is going on, and you might want to be just very, very mindful and keep your ears open to hearing what else is going on. That's just a possibility that could happen where you may get no response, no emotion. Then those are the situations where you want to be mindful. If you do get no emotion, you can always go back forward a little bit, and you can always say, well, I know we talked about the team meeting. I know there's obviously something that we need to improve upon, and see if they mention something. See if they mention something. Hopefully they do. I'm hoping that they do, Chaz. But those are just a couple scenarios that could happen in your case specifically. The key is just to ask a question, keep your same tone of voice that you normally would, but ask it in a way to where you are bringing a relevant topic, the meeting that you had. It was already discussed in the meeting that there was obviously an issue, even though they didn't talk to you about it. There's an issue there. So you're trying to be the absolute best project manager on the planet, and you're trying to make sure that you know the information you need to know so that you can help improve the project. That's how I would handle it. I'm curious to know, how does it work out for you when you have that conversation? It typically will not become a tense conversation as long as as you have your same tone of voice and you're asking questions from a place of genuine sincerity. If you come or if they come back at you and being a bit more accusatory, that's when you have to just have your numbers together. And so another part of that, Chess, that I would say I would recommend for you to do is before you have that conversation. Now, we've kind of talked about how to not have tension. Okay. There's a certain way you do it, certain questions you ask from that place of sincerity. You have a relevant topic, the meeting, etc. But come into that meeting with data, Chiz. So in the event they ask you specifically about, or they tell you, oh, we're having a problem with this metric or this KPI or whatever the case may be, then you already in your mind, you have some data in your pocket, as I say, in your back pocket, that you can bring out whenever it is time to do so. So if they ask you a question, they say, well, the project is really struggling with this specifically, and this metric should be at this percentage, it's at that percentage. You may say, well, from what I've reviewed of the project, we are at this percentage, or we are right below this percentage, to make sure that you are both seeing the same information or you both have the same data. Because sometimes what I found, Ches, that happens in certain situations when it is a supervisor and a project manager is that sometimes the supervisor does not have the true big picture of what's actually going on in the project manager really does, and they may think that, oh, this is a metric we're doing really bad, but in actuality things may be going very well. So have a couple statistics ready for you based on what was discussed. I know there were some things that were mentioned, obviously, during the meeting that you had where you felt like it was directed somewhat towards you, but just talked about in front of the group. Whatever those topics or those issues that came up that they discussed, your supervisor discussed, I would make sure you have some statistics, you have some data point, something, Chiz, as it relates to whatever it was that was discussed in the meeting. So that when they ask you or they maybe mention what the problems are with the project specifically that are around these two, three, four issues that they discussed, then you already are prepared with the data that you need to talk about it. This is how you can make a difficult conversation not difficult by just having that dialogue. But always, just as I mentioned during my interaction that I had last week, at the expo event I attended, you always have to be prepared to be on guard. You always have to be prepared to defend yourself if you need to, or at least explain yourself. What happens is when people have those conversations with their supervisor, there's issues, and they say this is an issue. People go into those conversations, Chaz, from an emotional place. And so I'm sharing with you what's happened. This is not necessarily your scenario because you are very, very, very thoughtful. I can tell just in terms of how we communicate here. But a lot of times, Chaz, what people will do is if they were in your situation, Chaz, they would say, "Oh, I can't believe my supervisor just had this meeting with everybody and they know this is an issue. They didn't come talk to me directly. I'm going to go talk to them. I'm going to talk to them, right?" And so they go into these conversations from a very high emotional state. And so they're giving their knee-jerk reaction. They're saying, what's going on? Why wasn't this discussed to me? And so the way that they come across as supervisor automatically starts to create tension because they're coming from an emotional place of being upset, being angry, and being frustrated. And they don't prepare. So that when the supervisor says, we're at this percentage, that percentage, or this KPI, and etc., then this person, instead of taking the time to really look at this from an unbiased standpoint and say, okay, these are legitimate issues we're having, or these are illegitimate issues we're having, they just go in with emotion. And when they are brought with statistics from the supervisor, they just basically don't know what to say because they don't have anything to present or to defend their argument. And that's the reason why people start to create tension with their bosses or their supervisors because they're responding from emotion, but they're not one subscribed to this channel and they may not be preparing themselves in the event they need that data. You may not need any of it, Ches. They may just tell you, Ches, this is what's going on, this is the problems we're having, and etc. You may not need any data whatsoever, but I would much rather you, friend, to go into a conversation overly prepared so that you are ready, whatever comes up in that conversation, than to be that person that is completely caught off guard. Because if they're obviously having those conversations in front of the group as a whole, then I don't want you to be the person or be in a situation where people are thinking, or the supervisor thinks you don't know what's going on with the project, when in actuality you do. That's why I would say have your data, go through those points that they discussed during their conversation with everybody, have everything together that you need so that you're able to articulate it in the best way and be able to defend yourself whenever you are ready or whenever you may have to. I hope that gives you some insight to consider. I'm sharing with you C-suite executive level strategy. This is not strategy of someone that's just starting out in their career. This is how we think. We think a bit more strategically, especially when it comes to those very hard conversations that we've had. I've been in that situation, Chess. I've been in that situation where I've worked for someone or I've worked with someone that was a supervisor and I had to have difficult conversations. And this is exactly the way I do it. I do it exactly that way. I always keep it very, very baseline, conversational like tone with that person, and I always make sure I have data points, and I always ask like, what are you struggling with, or what are the issues you see? Because most of the time people will talk about what's bothering them if they feel comfortable sharing that with you, so they'll talk to you about it. You just have to listen, and based on what they say, try not to take anything emotionally, because there may be aspects that you have to improve, there may be aspects that maybe are doing just fine, but just being that unbiased person and thinking of it through the lens of, yes, I can see why this is an issue. Yes, I can see why this is an issue. I do not see why this is an issue. Having those talking points will benefit you tremendously. I hope that gives you something to work with. Please let me know how that conversation goes so that you're not creating tension. I know you will not, especially hopefully after our conversation, but you'll be in a good place, in a very solid place, if you follow a couple things that I mentioned and just make it a conversation. You're just talking to someone and just saying, what's going on? How can I help you? How can we make this project work and be more successful? Now, I talk about this a lot in any of my videos. If those of you who are new watching my content, managing difficult conversations is a critical milestone of high stakes communication. Being able to navigate situations like Ches mentioned, like I mentioned earlier today, will absolutely help you to stand out from other people, because most people, as I mentioned, that are in leadership roles, they know how to communicate. But when the pressure is on, when the conversation may be going in a more contentious way, they really struggle with what do they do? How do they do it? How can I not sound rude? How can I not sound aggressive? There's a certain way you do it, and that's why I'm here to help you all be able to navigate that as much as I can. If you are dealing with something personally and you're trying to elevate, you're trying to go to that next level, then you're always welcome to reach out to me directly at exciteexcellence.org, or contact me on any social media platform at excellence, and I will be happy to give you some insights in terms of how I can support you on those journeys. Now, there's a lot of things that happen when you are able to manage difficult conversations. It's not something that's only for, let's say, a situation where you're dealing with a manager or a supervisor. If you are negotiating your salary, if you are presenting in front of a board, and perhaps they ask you some questions that might be a bit more challenging, all of these things I'm sharing with you are critically important to help you being able to communicate confidently and concisely under pressure. I cannot overstate how important it is to master these skills if if you are trying to be an exceptional leader or an exceptional communicator. These are just skills you have to have, and I know a lot of it may sound like a lot that I share with you on the channel, but there's definitely a step-by-step way to learn this. Of course, if we work together, I'll help you do that, but this is just a work in progress, and I know many of you are aspiring perhaps to be into senior VP roles, C-suite roles, entrepreneurs like myself, or you're doing other amazing things in the world, and being able to navigate difficult conversations is just a part of it. Sometimes people think, well, I don't need to learn about that, or I'm going to Toastmasters about that. Now, I'll tell you, I have been in Toastmasters. I'm a distinguished Toastmaster. Only 1% of their 358,000 members accomplished the Distinguished Toastmaster Award in the entire world. So I know all about Toastmasters and I absolutely love Toastmasters. But there's a certain depth that you cannot get from Toastmasters when it comes to these very, very high stakes situations. They're working on it, but there's just some things that unless you've been in those situations and you have the wherewithal or the knowledge base to be able to help someone navigate them, you can't do it. Toastmasters cannot teach you that. And I talk to a lot of people that communicate with me in that way, and they think, oh, Toastmasters helps me to do this, and Toastmasters helps me do that. Toastmasters will help you tremendously. It's helped me tremendously being a great public speaker. But there's just some parts of under pressure communication Toastmasters cannot help you with. You have to be able to be in the hot seat and learn from someone that's been in the hot seat multiple times. I've been burned a few times, and that's why I'm here to share this information with you all. Now we're going to be live tomorrow night. That's my plan right now, is Q&A. So if you have any situations specifically that you're navigating with, so for instance, Ches mentioned this situation. Ches, I appreciate you so much for mentioning that, friend, because a lot of people watch the videos after the lives, they watch the replays, and I'm really here to truly build a community of individuals that can communicate at a higher level. And Ches, someone in another part of the world may be going through a similar project management issue that you're navigating right now with your supervisor. And so it allows other people to learn. There may be somebody that watches this 20 years from now and they say, wow, you know what? I saw that Ches was going through this and I saw how I might want to think about it in terms of when I talk to my supervisor. This is a place to learn. And when I tell you all that I'm really truly on a mission to build the largest high stakes, high pressure content library for leaders on planet Earth, I am so incredibly serious about that because I want to be a resource to many people in the world, not only from my expertise, but also from your expertise. Because many of you have been in different type of situations or you're navigating different situations that if I believe if we collectively as a group are continuing to provide content and share our experiences and our stories, that ultimately people will start to pick up and they'll start to learn how to communicate better under pressure. And that will help people to become a lot more confident in terms of how they are communicating and navigating those challenging type of situations. So I appreciate you all so much. I will be live tomorrow to go over any Q&A, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye for now.